Welcome to the July 7th, 2022 meeting of the Riverfront Design Committee. My name is John Postick and I'm the chair of the committee. The following guidelines are in place for meetings in the council chamber at City Hall. Only the south entrance to City Hall will be open for access to the building. For exiting the building, all exits can be used. Air purifying machines have been installed in the chamber. Hand sanitizer machines and disposable face masks will be available. When called on, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments to the committee. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to that item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or the Arts District parking garage immediately south of City Hall, staff can provide a parking validation ticket to you. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Riverfront Design Committee meeting, then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Desiree, will you please call the roll?
Committee Member Postick.
Present.
Committee Member Heisel. Committee Member Dean.
Present.
Committee Member Herrera.
Present.
Committee Member Howard.
Present.
Committee Member Larson. Committee Member Montoya.
Present.
Committee Member Templeton.
Thank you, Desiree. Agenda item number 2, approval of minutes from the February 21, 2022 special meeting. I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Montoya.
Be moved by Howard, seconded by Montoya. And the vote passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 2B, approval of minutes from the May 5th, 2022 meeting. I would entertain another motion. Thank you.
Second, Montoya.
Moved by Templeton, seconded by Montoya. And the motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4, continuance requests. There are none. Item number 5, consent docket. There are none. Item number 6, cases for individual consideration. Item 6A, SRCA-22-00009 at 515 Southwest 10th Street. Laura?
Thank you. This is a request to demolish a house that's on Southwest 10th Street. This is the right, yeah. And I'll just kind of run through the pictures. This is a neighborhood that was established over 100 years ago. You haven't seen very many requests. Most recently, a couple, 3 blocks from here, you had a request for variances for a house to be set back when a new house was being constructed so that it would line up with the 100-year-old houses in the neighborhood. So that's like the only thing you've done in this neighborhood. This is the current house that was inherited by the church, and I'll kind of go through that in my staff report. And they inherited it in this condition. There is a garage at the back. They're not planning on demolishing it currently, but it is included in this application. So, the CA is good for 2 years, and if you approve it, they would have up to 2 years with the current CA to demolish it if they so desire to do that. It's called a garage, but it's extremely small. And so it is immediately adjacent to Blumenthal's, which is more of an industrial use. That happens to be in the downtown design district, so you haven't seen anything with that. The dividing line is between these two properties. And it's across the street from Little Flower Church, which most of you are probably familiar with. And this is adjacent on the west. Let me go back to that. So this house is not listed on the National Register, as I stated in the staff report, but it was indicated in Phase 4 of the intensive level survey of downtown Oklahoma City as being contributing to a potential historic district. I'll stress there has been no movement on the part of any property owner or the city to establish this potential district, which could be called the Little Flower Riverside School Historic District, since they're across the street from each other. I included in your packet the survey form that was filled out for this house, as well as the map that showed where this was located, so you could get an idea of where all the other contributing structures were in this potential district. So one of the things that I would point out, as I stated in your staff report, is the guidelines that are quoted in here refer to the Urban Design Commission, but that was an oversight back in 2015 when we did the demolition criteria. It was a cut and paste, and I think that was a cut that didn't happen to put it in, but that is the section from Scenic River. The other thing to point out is, while Scenic River specifically exempts single-family residential from having to get a CA, this is also zone DTD2, which is Downtown Design District, and that requires a CA, so that is why you're seeing it today. And if something is in both, the ordinance says that Scenic River, that it will go to the Riverfront Design Committee for action. So in the staff report, I included the numerous pages of demolition criteria, which takes up about 6 or 8 pages. And indicated various parts of that guideline that talks about the design, the form, the urban character, and I addressed each one of those and what the importance of this structure is. It's over 100 years old. There's other houses that are the same age, and then there's newer houses that have been built, in like the last 20 years in this neighborhood. One of the concerns that staff had is we believe that this is a historic resource and an architectural resource, and we've lost a lot of those in this area, mostly across Walker from here as well as north of 40. However, the guidelines do have criteria that at the time I wrote the staff report, we didn't have the information addressing the criteria. And so in my staff report, we indicated that we felt we needed additional information because we didn't have significant enough information to agree that it to recommend approval for the demolition. Subsequent, a couple of days ago, you all got an email from me with additional information from the applicant. And I'm not to steal their thunder or anything, and I don't think he would mind. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and so we can include that in our discussion. So this hopefully looks familiar. You all received a copy of this, although I had trouble. I had to reduce it, and hopefully you were able to open it. So additional information was provided by the applicant once they received the staff report. And so they provided numerous additional pictures, specifically of the inside, because staff doesn't go inside when we go out to take pictures. We're taking pictures of the outside. And this is fenced, and I typically don't go in a fenced yard, even though I know nobody's living there. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through the pictures. If you want me to stop because you wanted to ask a question about one, please feel free. But I just kind of wanted to indicate this is the additional information that we did receive in response to the staff report. And so they provided additional pictures of the exterior of the structure, and there's additional comments that they made on the pictures as well about the things that we're seeing. Holes in the roof. As well as close-up pictures of the condition of various parts of the house, showing where they used different kinds of shingles to patch. Staff would acknowledge that this wasn't the original cladding of the house, probably. That the porch was probably totally different and had more ornate columns versus the metal ones that are on there now. There's probably was spindle work, which is typical of this design of a house, which is the folk Victorian. This is showing the cracks on the porches, cracks that they were attempting, at some point somebody was trying to fix in the foundation. And then we have pictures of the inside. As I said, staff doesn't go inside to take pictures, showing the impact of what it's like on the outside, which is causing damage on the inside. There's mold, black mold in the house in numerous locations, cracks in the walls. Damage to the floor, cracks in the floors. I didn't even want to go there. The only thing I've seen that was worse than that is I lived in an old house built in the 20s that had is it called knob and tube? That when I discovered that was kind of scary to me. But that right there, I wouldn't want that in my house either. And the water heater is actually in a room. It's not in a closet. It's not out in the utility room or whatever. It is in a livable room in the house. And then the applicant, who happens to be a contractor, provided this information, consulted with other contractors that he deals with, to indicate, in their opinion, the best thing to do would be to demolish it. And they went on to add, if they fixed it, this is what they could be looking at. And I think most of us would acknowledge that a church typically doesn't spend this kind of money fixing a structure, especially one of this size. It'd be different if they were talking about the church itself, but they're talking about a house, and they're wanting to build a new house to use it for people to be able to live in it. So the applicant also provided information. This is a house that he had built elsewhere in the city, to say they could build a new one. It could look similar to this. He and I discussed the fact that it'd be nice if it fit in and had the same features as the houses in the neighborhood. But the other thing is, if they build a new one, it will have to meet the DTD2 requirements, which is minimum 2 stories, maximum setback 10 feet, unless they were to apply for a variance like the other house I mentioned a couple of blocks away, so that it would fit in the neighborhood. And so, and let me go back to the beginning of this in case he wants to refer to this. So in the staff report you received last week, just as a reminder, Staff recommended that this matter be continued to your next meeting in August to give the applicant direction that they provide additional information to meet one or more of the applicable criteria of the demolition guidelines. And so what they have provided us is they provided us with information about the condition, specifically the condition, what it was going to cost to repair it, as well as potentially a replacement, what it could look like. Just as a reminder, we're not acting on the replacement today. That would more than likely, if it met the DTD2 criteria, it would be administratively approved. If they wanted to vary the height or vary the setback and it would need a variance, it would come back before you. But based on this additional information they have provided, while it's unfortunate that this house is so far gone, staff would acknowledge that they have met the guideline requirements for submitting documentation to show why they need to demolish it. And with that in mind, and I didn't ask Jill if I could do this, with the additional information, staff's recommendation would change. I'm assuming I could do that. Yes. To say that they have provided the documentation to allow staff to support the demolition of this structure, or demolition of the structures on the property.
Thank you, Laura. That was a very involved application
Sorry, yes.
explanation, and we're grateful for you walking us through it.
And the applicant and the owner representing Little Flower Church are here. But do you have any questions for staff at this point?
Laura, so with your last statement, they have provided enough information complying with the demolition?
Staff's opinion is that they have.
Okay. Okay.
And just as a reminder, the demolition criteria are guidelines.
Thank you.
I do have questions about the staff report and the guidelines that are required to go forth with the application to demolish the house. It says there are several different guidelines that have to be met, like structural integrity, economic feasibility, and then standard for like evaluating the reasonable economic return on this, and the different things that need to be discussed. And is it one of the 3 or 4 options, or do they have to include more than one option? Is it an or an and?
In my opinion, they do not have to meet all of them. They could submit, most of the time, what we see is replacement. They'll submit. That's typically what I get for downtown when things come in. But in this particular case, they weren't ready to submit anything more than a concept of what could go there.
Right.
And so they've actually touched on numerous of the criteria with the information that they have submitted.
Okay. I think on the, I would have liked to have seen maybe a structural engineer, a neutral party discussing the structural integrity of the house. Also, you were talking about the feasibility of replacing and not replacing. I think with the escalation in construction materials today, the 2015 price is no longer valid, and the replacement of he said $150,000 for the house, and now there's no way it's $150,000 nowadays. But that was just my one concern about whether it needed to be one or more of those options and stuff. So I think that's it for now. Oh, I do have, in the demo, is that something that will be addressed? Will the old growth trees that are there, are those something that will be taken out also, or are those going to be?
We don't have criteria about saving trees, and I haven't had that conversation. But I'm assuming that they would do everything they could to, I mean, that one tree is enormous that's in the front yard.
Well, none of them are in good shape, but they still have a lot of potential. You know.
Right. So, but we don't have any type of tree preservation, but that would be something staff would try to work with them when they come through for what they're replacing it with.
Laura, would you mind putting back up the slide that showed the location of this property? And I just want to make sure
I got to go all the way through this
I
one.
recognized where the Little Flower Church was. So I think
Yeah,
it was the one
sorry,
with the
let me
red
get-
roof.
Okay, so that is.
Yeah.
So Little Flower is in this, so it's directly south of it. And so this is Walker as you come down, you know, going over 40. Blumenthal's is on the corner. You can't miss it with all the blue. And it's that first street to the west. And then the Lower Scissortail is across the street. And Riverside School is about half a block down here. Because 10th Street is, if I'm not the streets don't line up when you go south of 40. They're staggered in there. They're not directly across Walker from each other.
Well, I realize we're not reviewing the proposed building going back in place, but due to its location, I would encourage the applicant to make considerations for the property that's going to be built, that it does have some characteristics of the former property, the Victorian styling. I understand the structure may get larger, may have 2 stories, but to have a presence that had a similar presence that it has now with some of those features, the architectural features.
We actually have started that conversation with the applicant, and we were looking at the houses that are still on that street. There are some holes already, but there are a lot of occupied lots. And I was surprised some of them were newer than I thought they were going to be. So we were trying to look at the older ones to capitalize on those type of features.
Maybe not the asbestos siding.
No.
And I think it was originally probably a wood porch and not a concrete porch.
Probably so.
Yeah. Saves money.
That's all I have.
Are there any additional questions from committee members for city staff? Hearing none, would a representative from the applicant care to add a comment?
Good morning. My name is Jose. I'm with JP Construction. Basically, I'm a volunteer from the church, so I'm trying to help the church to do this process. And the reason why is because the church is, if you can see it, the church got there is basically 2 churches up there, an old church and another church that it was built. So they're kind of stressed out already because there's a lot of maintenance, and there is another house where the fathers live. There is another house on the same property where the nuns live, and there is a school up there. So the church is already stressed out on their finances because all the maintenance, all the stuff they have to do. And I'm trying to help, the best I can. I am not an architect. I wish I was. So that's the reason we don't have a real nice, presentation, and that's the reason we don't hire a structural engineer too, because we're trying to save as much as we can, to help the church. If you notice, the neighborhood where the church is located is not a rich neighborhood. I'm a volunteer in the church. I'm a usher, and I see the donations, on the Mass Sunday, and I see coins in there. So this is not a rich church. So, and basically, that's why we're doing this. We're trying to do what is most savvy money-wise for the church. But we accept the recommendations. We understand. We follow the rules. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion, or failing that, a motion?
I wanted to make one comment as you all contemplate a motion if you're leaning toward approval. I think it's been a while since we've had one of these where we said it was potentially a historic resource and where they're looking at demolishing it. The criteria for demolishing due to structural integrity, that guideline sets a really high bar that it poses an imminent threat to public health and safety and that the demolition is required to alleviate that threat. I read that to mean there's no other way to fix the condition of the structure than tearing it down. We have an estimate from the contractor of how he would fix the building, so clearly there is a way to fix it. It's beyond the level that they are able to fund, but it's possible. I think that the more applicable guideline in this case is likely economic feasibility, and that the structure cannot reasonably adapted or rehabilitated for any other use that would result in a reasonable economic return based on the condition that it's in and what it would take to bring it up to a livable condition. So because we didn't recommend a motion to approve, I think as you all make a motion to, if you can incorporate, a specific reference to the criteria that are applicable in this case, that'll help us to maintain a consistent standard in how we review demolitions.
And Katie, can you assist us in pointing us towards what should be referenced?
So if you've got the staff report open, page 5 has the criteria for economic feasibility, if you all feel like that is applicable. And Laura, if you think if that makes sense to you,
It does.
to reference that one.
It's E.
So I think
E3.
what I'm hearing Katie suggest is if you agree with what Katie was saying, if somebody was inclined to recommend approval, just so that we know why you all did, that, you all considered the stuff, all the information, the additional information from the applicant, that you could actually reference the economic feasibility component of the demolition guidelines, the information provided showed that the economic feasibility was not there to actually renovate this structure. And I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear at all when I was doing I stood out here and went, whoa, Katie and I didn't really get down to the end when I'm changing my recommendation. Sorry about that.
There's a lot of parts to this application.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, so, and normally you have something you read directly from us at the end. So if you're so inclined to support their application for demolition, a suggestion was from Katie that you could actually reference, one of the criteria they clearly met was this, even though they provided a lot of information.
Perhaps a motion that could be made could be to move to approve the application due to its compliance with the economic feasibility criteria of the demolition guidelines. Is that perhaps what you're recommending or suggesting?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. Any further discussion?
And if anybody needs that repeated, I'm writing that down when you get to that point, since the chair can't make a motion.
Chair is not able to make a motion. But the chair would entertain a motion from any of the other committee members.
Templeton would like to make a motion to approve based on economic feasibility because there is no viable economic use of this structure for purpose as intended.
Thank you, Commissioner Templeton. Is there a second?
Montoya, second.
Seconded by Montoya.
I'm not getting that screen.
I know a lot of you are looking at the staff report. Make sure you're on the live meeting tab so that the vote button will pop up for you.
Oh, well, yeah.
And the motion passes. I'd like to thank everybody for your patience and working through the complexity of that one, giving it the attention it deserves.
Thank you.
Item number 7A, other business, SPUD-01418 at 2942 Southwest 13th Street. Laura?
Thank you. So this seems to be an area where we've had spuds. This is probably the fourth spud you've seen in 3-4 years out in this neighborhood. I can't see it. There. So this is west of May, north of Southwest 15th. In an area that has, as you could see from the zoning map that was included with the staff report, all different kinds of zonings, from residential to I-2. I don't think there's any I-3. And this is directly west of stockyards that's not in the city, so we have no control over what happens there. So it's a very interesting neighborhood. This particular area has had a lot of demolitions over the years, and there's a lot of vacant property. And so the lot in question that you see up there in yellow, it's all vacant around it. And what happened was last year they actually submitted a building permit application for this lot. And then they were told you need a certificate of approval, so they submitted the certificate of approval to build this building, and I started researching the use, and the use is prohibited in Scenic River. And so it's taken us a while to get to this point. Their only option was to rezone it to a SPUD to get this use. And so, as you can see from the pictures, there's a lot of vacant land, as I said, around it. That day, I think the city was working on some sewer stuff, and they had the city trucks out. But this is looking east toward May, and as you get toward May, you have some of those automotive businesses that they wouldn't be allowed to do today if they were to come in to do them new. They were already there. That whole area has those kind of uses. There's salvage yards. There's all of that sprinkled in. But there's also some houses. So they actually have, to the north, there's a house across the street. And so there are some houses sprinkled in with all the vacant lots and the industrial uses. And that is Catty Corner, so that's to the northwest. And that's directly west, so it's vacant across the street to the west. So I'm just going to go back to there. So in looking at this proposal, the issue is what the use they needed allows stuff to be done on the exterior. It would typically allow them to do outdoor storage, to work on things outside. And that's what we didn't want to have happen here. So we were looking at, well, what's the solution? Well, what he's wanting to do, he's going to do everything in the building. So the business he has a contract with a company where he gets sent out on calls, and somebody's broken down. He goes, he takes his equipment, he goes out on I-35 and he changes his tire, or he fixes someone's car and he gets them on the road. He's not working on other people's vehicles at his property, but he needs to maintain his own equipment that he has. And so when we were looking at how can this work, given this very strange hodgepodge of zoning and uses that we have in this neighborhood, and a lot of those uses have been established for decades, came up with, well, if he needed to do that use, if he did it inside, it really wouldn't have an issue. Work on them inside, park them on the inside of the building, and then you basically have this metal building, you have a small parking lot in the front, and it would have probably the least amount of impact that we could figure out how to make this work. So in looking at this, we were looking at what uses would be appropriate, because when they submitted it for the SPUD, they were focused on what do we need. And so we added a few uses that would be totally appropriate there, just in case something changed over the years. We didn't want them to have to come back in and rezone it again to add just, another use. One-use spuds aren't necessarily a solution because that really locks them into something very narrow. And so when we put together this spud, and I'm trying to flip to it, you have included attached to the staff report with the application, the original spud document that they proposed. And then you had the one that I attached to the staff report, which is where we added some uses. We were real specific about some of these uses are for fleet vehicles only. So it's his vehicles only, must be parked inside, all the work has to be done on the inside. And originally, he was wanting 2 driveways from the side street, Brookline, and we cut that down to 1, and we were actually talking about that today. He still has access from the side street, but we're real specific. You can't back out because that's maneuvering in the right-of-way, so the vehicles would be pulled in, and then they would have to pull out frontwards. They can't back out. The alley is currently not paved, and we had a whole discussion about garbage and where they might put a dumpster because you can't really put it in the right-of-way of the alley. And with the alley not being paved, you're not going to get a garbage truck to pull in there in the dirt, in the grass to pick up that. So we were talking about some options. So the document itself that's proposed, it meets the setbacks. The only thing that we varied was the uses, but I feel like we came up with a really great solution of making the uses work in that neighborhood. It would be different if the entire neighborhood was houses, but it's not, and especially 1 block in from May. So staff is recommending that the committee make a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission. Let me see how I worded that. Based on they call those MDS, the MDS statement, all the conditions that staff has provided you with your staff report. And the applicant is here and the owner is here.
Thank you, Laura. Are there any questions from committee members for city staff?
Templeton has a question. Sorry. In the SPUD, there's 2 different things I need a little clarification on. Site-proof screening versus the SRODD regs for fencing.
So site-proof screening is screening that's needed for things like a dumpster enclosure.
Okay.
So that's totally separate from fencing allowances.
So the fencing is basically required to be black
Well,
plastic?
if they wanted to do chain link fencing, if for some reason he needed fencing on the property, and he wanted to do chain link, he'd have to have black or green coated,
Right.
manufacturer coated chain link. Now, you can't use chain link fencing for screening purposes, even if you wanted to put slats in it. So if they end up with a dumpster that they want to put out and they have to build an enclosure, they can't use chain link for that site-proof screening. They could use wood, they could use masonry.
I was just thinking about how they would enclose or protect the property, and would it be site-proof screening if there's the house across the street, or would it need to be, SRODD is the fencing, chain link fence?
Well, SRODD also says that you should not put fencing up to screen a use
Okay.
from the surrounding area. And I'm sorry, I can find that
No,
if you
that's
need
fine.
that section. So I wouldn't think that they would need to, fence their parking lot where they would have employees parking, during the day. Somebody's coming in to drive one of the trucks to go change someone's tire. But if they needed to put fencing up, it would have to meet the SRODD height material requirements,
Thank you.
which is something we'll work out with. The CA is sitting on my desk, and it has been for quite some time, but I can't do anything with it until and if this is approved. And then it will have to meet whatever criteria, whatever the SPUD says.
Howard, question. Laura, as far as are the requirements, I understand the fencing, but can there be landscape buffer requirements? I mean, for outside storage?
They're not allowed to have outside storage.
Okay, okay.
But this was set up so everything's on the inside.
Perfect.
And they really don't have room for much. They're maximizing all of the land with the building and the parking. And there is some landscaping that they are proposing.
So for the limitations of uses, will that be updated in their SPUD application? You mentioned several that were allowable.
Yeah, I've provided, we actually did a marked up version, which to me gets too confusing when we're talking in a meeting. And so I did the marked up version, which started with the applicant's version, struck out stuff that we're eliminating, and then added in, showing and underlined the stuff that I changed it to, and that's been provided to the subdivision and zoning staff who are working on their planning commission staff report for the packet that goes out tomorrow. And I will be getting with them after this meeting on any other changes you guys might or might not recommend. And that would be going forward to the planning commission. So the planning commission will know what version that you all are recommending.
Okay, thank you.
Templeton again. How does this SPUD overlay with the appearance of the building and the SRODD? What is the building going to look like, and does that matter with the SPUD?
So they have to meet SRODD. What they've turned in, it's a steel building. Steel is allowed. So
It would just be a administrative approval that wouldn't have to come before us. If it's
correct, right, due to its size.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments or questions from committee members for planning staff? Hearing none, would a representative from the applicant like to add any comments?
If you could introduce yourself, Victor?
Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Victor Ortega, and I'm here representing Mr. Eleazar Rodarty. I am a builder director by trade, and I'm here to answer any questions. Also, to add on to what Mrs. Laura was saying, is that the main purpose of this building is for Mr. Rodarty to store all of his vehicles and all of his equipment that he uses on a daily basis for his road service and road assistance business. As she was mentioning, this lot, I believe it's about 150 by 60 to 65 foot wide, and that's actually given the perfect size for him to fit a 50 by 100 steel building. The nature of the building, it's going to be a bolted structure, that it's going to be single sloped with a 20 feet of elevation, and it would include all the details such as gutter systems and the right coating on the outside. He doesn't intend to use it for any business or public purposes, but it's mainly for him to store several equipment that he has accumulated throughout the years. As Ms. Laura was mentioning, there is nothing but open land and open field, and Mr. Eleazar feels that as he builds this building, eventually that might drive additional investors and additional businesses to improve the area in the vicinity because it is predominantly industrial. There are now new buildings on the other side of May Avenue, which is to the east of the street. And there has been, several other structures that are coming up on this side of town. Aside of that, I did submit it with the application, a sample building structure and also some details, including the architectural blueprints that specify the layout of the building and also the landscaping proposal with other details. Aside of that, I think that this will be actually beneficial to the community. We did a little bit of a research with the closest neighbors that he is familiar with, and so far they are pro on supporting this new construction. There is actually only 2 occupied houses that face the building, but aside of that, there's just nothing but vacant lots from older structures that have been removed. And that is pretty much, what the intent is of this new construction. He had already planned to build this sometime this year, but because of this process and the need of approvals, he is, expecting to see if this can pass eventually to benefit the business that he runs. If you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Are there any questions from committee members for the applicant?
Yes, Howard, question. How many driveways will you have, and which street or streets will they access it from?
Yes. In this case, and after the modifications and the suggestions from Ms. Laura mentioned, this will only have 2 approaches. There would be 2 driveways to your question. One would be on accessing through Southwest 13th, and that would be approximately 22 feet wide, and that would actually be directed onto 5 parking lot spots. That would actually face also the width of the building, which is the 50 feet, right where the cursor is pointing. And then to the west of the building, there would be a wider approach that would actually give access to 2 overhead doors that would actually also be placed along Brookline Avenue. And we're talking about 2 overheads that are 14 feet wide by 14 foot tall, so that he can have ample access for all of the vehicles. And that's pretty much, what we're considering, only 2 driveways followed by sidewalk on the perimeter, and also by grass and treated trees, past the sidewalk as well, for better looks and better improvement.
There is a maximum width of 30 feet for a driveway that's currently part of the code, and that's what we would be looking at, in addition to the sidewalks they mentioned, because they have to put in sidewalks on both street frontages, street trees, which, while obviously with driveways and location of sidewalks, so we'll get creative about where they'll all be located.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from committee members for the applicant? No? Thank you. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
And you can read this one straight from the last page of the staff report if you agree with staff.
Howard, making a motion to recommend approval of the application on the basis that the project complies with the intent of the Scenic River Overlay Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section D of the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Templeton, second.
Moved by Howard, seconded by Templeton. And the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 8, Communications Administrative Approval Report. Laura, is there anything we need to discuss?
On here. Wheeler Park is getting a new concession building, as you can see, so I don't think they've spent money in that park for a while. And other than that, a fence and a new 2,000 square foot building on another existing property there that it's expanding, so they needed some more building space. So other than that, unless you have questions about those?
Thank you. Item 8B, comments from Planning Department staff.
So I double-checked my schedule. currently, I don't have any applications that are showing up for your agenda for next month. So I will get with Katie because the deadline was Tuesday. And you will hear from me hopefully next week to let you know if we have a meeting or not, because August would be a great time not to have to come to the meeting, I think. It'll probably be even hotter than it's going to be today, so. And I don't know if Katie has anything to add.
I have no other comments.
Item 8C, comments from committee members. Next meeting date to be determined. And with that, we'll adjourn. Thank you.